Welcome to the podcast, Will. It's absolutely fantastic to have you on today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
So I'm going to ask you the same question I ask all my guests. What is your money story?
Well, my money story is, so I grew up in Harlow in Essex, and I grew up in a kind of average household, so three-bedroom house, comprehensive schooling, state schooling. But the interesting thing about my upbringing is I don't remember having many conversations with money with my parents. I remember getting some pocket money, and I remember sort of getting it on a Saturday, and then on a Sunday I would get up really early with one of my best friends, and we would cycle to the local boot sale and buy like secondhand computer games, and then spend the rest of the day. And that was kind of what we did with our money. But I don't remember having much in terms of savings and building up. I don't think I had a savings account, or if I did, I only had a very small amount in there. But I suppose the most interesting piece was that when I saw my parents growing up or going through their careers, I knew they were getting promotions and getting higher paid jobs, and would go on slightly nicer holidays, etc. But it wasn't until it all came to fruition when I left university so I was 21 years old and got my first sort of graduate job. And my parents essentially said, right, we're retiring and we're going to move to Spain. And so from the youngest age, from that sort of young part of my career where I was kind of working crazy hours, and then I'd phone up my parents and be like, how was your day? And they're like, oh, we just went to this nice little village, walked around in the sun. And I was like, oh, wow, that sounds amazing. And I'm kind of slaving. And my parents were relatively young compared to their peers. And so what happened is that they just prioritized paying off the mortgage. And it's only, I kind of learned this later in life, that as soon as they got like bonuses and stuff, they just put it towards paying off the mortgage. And so that when they had this long grand plan, which I never knew about growing up, but as soon as my sister and I were kind of independent, they were like, right, we're going to retire and move to Spain. And so that had a really big impact on me, because I was like, I want that life. I like that piece of, let's say, walking around these nice little villages, having these like menu of the day, which cost a few euros. And so that really got me inspired to start saving a little bit of money myself. And I went into the financial services industry. So I'm an actuary by background. So for those who don't know what that is, it's essentially an accountant who loves statistics. So I would work with insurance companies, retirement schemes, endowments, and even some governments, and to help them mostly on the investment side to say, right, where should they put their sort of millions, sometimes billions of pounds invested. And so I started to get a bit into investing, but sort of like money. And so that kind of just led to my kind of story of being interested in trying to work hard, but kind of save, and have this kind of mission to, right, I want to think about my savings and having the benefits of it, because I essentially got to see the benefits of it from my parents. And I was like, I want that. And I think I felt very fortunate about that, because most people don't really get to see the benefits of savings, especially that kind of multi-year, even like decades kind of planning approach that my parents went through. And so it was really nice, especially as they never had super high paying jobs. They got paid well, but compared to their friends and colleagues, etc., they retired much earlier. So that's kind of the biggest impact on my money story. That's led me to be able to be really interested in it and have that kind of savings mindset.
And it's great to have a story where your parents have been an inspiration and created an aspiration for you as well, because so often we hear a story that's been given to us by our parents that tends to be around the things that you don't feel you can aspire to. You don't feel you are worthy enough. You don't feel you're ever going to be able to do better than your parents have done, etc., etc. What do you think created that mindset for your parents?
So I think it's probably more my dad's money story. So my dad grew up in Northern Ireland. Unfortunately, his parents died when he was in his teenage years. And so he had to get an apprenticeship. And so when he moved over, he essentially had a really poor upbringing. He had 3 brothers that he had to share a room with. So my dad always had this mentality of, when he moved over to the UK and started to work, he's always said he never wants to be poor again. And he had that mindset. So he always wanted to have that security, have that money. So when he worked, he had that kind of backstory and motivation to save. He wasn't of the mindset, I need to prove to anything, because he moved to a different country. He's got no one to prove, all of it, everyone. It wasn't at that kind of mindset that many people who potentially did have a more of a poor upbringing, they kind of, I've made it, look how much I've made it, and sort of show off to show off that. He didn't have that. He was much more, I just don't want to be like I was in the past, and therefore I want to be secure. So he had that mindset, which again, I think hasn't really impacted on, because we had a relative, my parents, my dad in particular, we had a food or money, anything when we were growing up. So it's a different mindset. It's more about the benefits of that piece, rather than, I say, my story is kind of linked to my dad's story, but it's totally different, if that makes sense.
It does, absolutely. So how has that fed into how you are bringing your children up?
Yeah, so I moved from the UK to Hong Kong in 2014 with the job that I was working at. And then it was around 2017, someone said to me, I was talking about my two daughters, and so they said, "Oh, enjoy this time with them. They only grow up once." And I was like, "Oh, it's an obvious statement, but had a big impact on me." So I wanted to then, so I said to my wife, "I think we should leave our corporate jobs and spend more time with the kids where they're growing up, as we're typically working longish hours and only seeing like a bit tired in the evenings and busy at the weekends." So we did. So in 2019, we left our corporate jobs and we moved from Hong Kong to a really beautiful place called Hoi An in Vietnam. Everyone, I recommend go there. It's absolutely ideal. Anyway, when I was leaving Hong Kong, a lot of people said to me, "How can you afford to take this time off work?" And I was in the financial services industry, so most people knew about money. But yet it seemed that I was in a very minority of people who actually put in that knowledge and put it into practice in terms of saving and investing our money. So we had this nest egg that allowed us to move. So then it got me, I felt so fortunate to be able to take this time off work and have this time with our daughters without any kind of that corporate pressure. Mm. And so I really felt, right, I want to teach my kids about money so they can have this same opportunity. They might choose to do something different, but I felt so lucky just to have the option to do what we did compared to so many other people. And so, so that's why I've started from, I think my youngest daughter was about 4 years old when I started saying, right, I'm going to really sort of teach them about money, but not try and lecture them, but more guide them and try and make it as fun as possible. So writing stories and coming up with fun analogies to make it interesting for them, and try and do it consistently rather than, I say, I'm going to sit you down and we're going to have a whole weekend of money. It was much more, right, when going to bed, can I think of adding in a little money story to maybe a story that I'm already telling them from a book or something like that.
And how do you think that has shaped their thoughts and feelings with regards to money? Because how old are they now?
So they're now 8 and 10 years old.
Okay.
And yeah, no, they're very conscious about money. They understand a lot about so we talk to them about how fortunate we are to be to do what we did and spend that time with them. And so it's a nice reference point for them. A bit like my money story. I kind of learned from my parents, and I really want my kids to learn from us and say, look, we could buy fancier cars, fancier clothes, different house, but we choose not to because we want to have that time with the kids, and that's our option. And so for them, I think they've got this good mindset about money. But I think it's hard for me because I've been talking to them for so many years that I'm not sure what the reference point would be if we didn't teach them about money, if that makes sense. So now they're into really good habits. So we give them some pocket money every week. And so they would put some money towards saving up for something. They'll put some money towards the long term and saving it. But one of the bits that we do with them, and we started when when my youngest was about 4 years old, I used the analogy of getting them to think of seeds, money like seeds. And so I said to them, look, you can give away those seeds and that's just like spending, or you can plant them and that's saving. And if you actually plant them or invest them, they'll start to grow, and then you'll grow these trees, which we call blue trees, and hence the name of my company, which is Blue Tree Savings. And so they can like visualize these trees. And when they were very young, it worked out really well because we had always really interesting conversations, but it wasn't really about money. It was about just growing this forest. And what do you need to do to grow your forest? Well, you need to keep some of the seeds that you receive. You need to plant them. You need to look after them. But you need to know that it's not going to just grow overnight. It's going to take a while to do that. And so it worked out really well, and especially because they were learning about the environment and at school. So they became a little bit protective of these trees, even though there's these like made up imaginary blue trees. They were still like, I want to look after them. I might take a few branches off here or there. But they didn't, the thought of just chopping down all of their trees was like, no, which is like perfect. So it's got that mentality of kind of looking into the future. So I think there's some really good lessons that I think that they're instilling, and I hope it sticks with them as they grow up. And the good thing is that other parents are kind of using that same analogy now, which is great.
Absolutely. And I think that's lovely. With the seeds analogy, you can either give them away or you can plant them and wait to see what they grow into. I love that analogy. With your two children, do you find they have a different mindset around money? Because I know with my two children, I know we've spoken about this before, they are very, very different. You know, my eldest child will plan to spend that money before he's even earned it, whereas my youngest child is very, very reflective on how that's going to affect the expenditure he's thinking about. How's that going to affect the levels of savings that he has? And we've brought them up, you know, exactly the same. You know, our values around money have been, you know, hopefully passed on to both of them, but their behaviors are very different. Are you seeing the same with your children?
Yes, so there's clearly a difference. They're not quite as extreme as I've seen, where one is like a hardened, won't let the money touch the wallet before it's spent, and the others won't spend any. My youngest is probably of the mindset of it takes a lot of work for her to spend. Like she always be, oh, do I really need that? She's got that kind of patience. And so for me, I'm actually trying to encourage her to say, what do you enjoy spending? Because it's all about balance. I hate the whole concept of you're either a spender or a saver. You have to be both, and you have to be good at both. If anything, you should be more of a spender, but just save some. And I think it's this balance that people seem to shy away from. It's like one or the other. So for my youngest, she's probably saving too much in terms of not getting into good spending habits and understanding what the joys that money can bring. My eldest, she's a bit more. She's not frivolous, so she doesn't just want to go out and spend. But if she wants something, she wants it soon. So she'll be like, right, I want this. How much do I have in my savings account? Right, what can I do now to get as much money as possible to buy that thing that I really want? But she won't touch her long-term savings, which is good, and she's never asked to. But she's a bit more gung-ho, but definitely not to the extremes that I've seen others. And it's really interesting. I think I'm doing more and more research, especially on my youngest one, about how do you encourage kids to spend. And I think that's really interesting because, as you know, with adults, the big issue is that majority of people spend too much, and therefore don't save, and therefore have all the financial stresses and anxieties that come along with that. So yeah, for my youngest daughter, it's trying to get that right balance. I think she's a little bit too saving mindset, but I don't think that's a big problem. It's more of a tweaks here and there, but I'm going to do more research. But the good thing is that they don't really compare each other too much, which is nice. I think they kind of learn from each other. So if my eldest does buy something, my youngest like, oh, I could probably buy that if I wanted to. I don't want to at the moment. But my eldest is a bit starting to get a little bit worried, because the youngest one, because she has less money because she's younger and but she's starting to catch up. So now I think my oldest one is probably a bit like, oh, right, maybe I should save a little bit more. I don't want my younger sister having more money than me.
And it's funny you say that about the learning, because with both my two, I got them both to complete their money archetypes assessment. So that they better understand why they behave the way that they do with regards to money. And it's quite funny. They will now kind of tell each other, oh, that's your romantic archetype coming up. Oh, that's your celebrity. And it is interesting how my eldest will encourage my youngest to spend. He has got my youngest child into thinking more about, branded clothing, etc. But equally, my eldest child does actually look at his bank balance in his everyday account and is now more mindful about projecting his needs. So, between now and the next pocket money, I'm going to have how much? Okay. So I can see that having that knowledge has helped each other to move away from the slightly more, when I say extreme, it's not extreme, but Sam is definitely a saver, whereas Adam is definitely a spender. But by them both understanding those behaviors a little bit more, then that has encouraged them to think probably more than me as a parent trying to promote that thought process, because I'm mum, and mum isn't always right. Of course she is, but my eldest doesn't think so.
No, it's a really interesting. One of the points you made about there is the sort of social pressure in terms of branding and stuff. And so this is not something we consciously thought about, but so we now live in Thailand, and I say we lived in Vietnam as well. And so my kids haven't had so much of that spending social pressure. There's not like the big designer shops here, and there's not very much in branding stuff. So clearly something like trainers and stuff like that, you get the sports brands, but no one seems to care. And none of their friends seem to care about that stuff relative to, say, family and friends in the UK, where it's much more prevalent at a younger age. So it'll be quite interesting as my children grow up, and then we start to go and spend more time with cousins and friends with children, how that will impact them. But at the moment, I'm quite liking the fact that they seem not too worried about what other friends are buying and wearing, etc. But it's an interesting development.
Yeah. And I think it is also an age thing as well, because I can remember my 13-year-old, when Sam is now 14, but when he was 13, I would say to him, what are you going to wear on Saturday? I don't know, Mum, just tell me. I don't care. You just tell me what to wear and I'll wear it. And then all of a sudden, almost overnight, from hitting his 14th birthday, all of a sudden, Mum, don't go near my wardrobe. I'm getting rid of that, and that. And instead, I want to look at getting this, and this. So I do think there is an awareness. And yes, the UK definitely, more visibility around brands, probably more awareness of, social media and influencers, etc., without a shadow of a doubt. But for me, I think the switch was hormonal in noticing girls, but also, unfortunately, the comparisonitis. That person has that brand of trainer, that person is wearing that brand of t-shirt, but they are aware of the cost of things. And I will say to them, well, I'm quite happy to buy you a new pair of trainers, but if you want that particular pair at that ridiculous price, then you're going to have to meet me halfway. And I think that then allows them to make a decision. They're engaged in the process of thinking, okay, I want that pair of trainers. Mum's going to give me that much money. Do I really want to spend that amount from my own money or not? And that, I think, and I hope, has allowed them to realize, even at their age, that they have to start being responsible about money, and it isn't just about bank of mum and dad.
Yes, I love that. I 100% agree with that. And it's that value of money going through, and it's interesting when that concept, because I assume that both parents have to be aligned to that as well, because sometimes what you find, and I've heard stories where one parent's like, I want to teach my kids about money and I want them to understand the value of money, and so they've been, as you say, right, you either have to pay it for yourself or pay some of it yourself. But then the other parent who's just like, I just want them to be happy. I don't want to hear this whinging. Let's just pay for it. And then you're like, just overcomes. And then the kids are kind of a bit confused, and they're clearly just going to then tend towards asking for money or talking to money to the most generous parent. So it's so important that parents align themselves, whether they're together or not.
Yeah.
To be in that mindset, to assume, and not just assume that if one parent does it, it's going to act in the best interest of the kids.
Exactly, absolutely. And that I think it can be really hard, because my natural tendency with my children has always been, if they go on a school trip, is to actually give them a bit more than they actually need, because I haven't wanted them to not have enough. But actually, I realized that was not a great way to demonstrate to them that they have got to understand the art of budgeting. They have got to understand to be responsible. I know that's because of my nurturer archetype. So I know I need to lean away from the automatic response of, here, have this, here, be happy, into a more solution-led mindset that says, you can have it, but. And the but has created them in thinking, can I do more chores around the house? Adam, can I get a Saturday job, etc., etc., getting them to work out how they can go about creating what they want. My natural tendency is to be a nurturer in the sense of that money archetype, but that's not necessarily the right set of behaviors to be leaning into if you want your children to have the right values themselves around money. And I think it's really important to be aware of your tendencies and not to automatically to do what you think is the right thing, because it's usually based on emotion. And as you know, from all the work that you've done, if we are coming from a place of emotion when it comes to money, that behavior is not necessarily the best behavior to be utilizing.
No, and it's really hard for many parents, especially because all parents feel that they want their children to have something more than what they had themselves when they were growing up. But that can be counterintuitive a little bit in terms of how kids are raised, as the points you've just raised. If you give your child, say, oh, I want my child to be happy and have whatever I couldn't have, but then that child then doesn't get the value of that. It doesn't understand the appreciation of that. And that can have big negatives when they're going into their own adulthoods. They don't understand the value of that. They live above their means. And it's like not very grateful for the money that they might have been given in the past, and therefore have those impacts. And so one of the hardest bits for parents, especially for parents who do have money and wealth, is that you're trying to have to teach your kids about scarcity to show that not all the time money is there, and almost give them a period where we don't have money. Or so I don't do it yet with my kids, but I can't imagine when we're older, I want to send them on like a gap year or whatever it may be, and say, we're not going to give you any money, or give them a small amount of money, but say, go work it out. So they have that, okay, I have to budget. It's not a case of, oh, mom says I have to budget, or dad says I have to budget, because that just feels, whereas if they actually have to budget because they only have this much money, changes their mindset, sees the importance more so than any kind of lecture that can be provided or guidance that can be provided. But it's really hard for parents because if you've got money, why do you want to see your kids struggling and potentially running out of money in certain situations? But unfortunately, that's sometimes the best way for learning. Again, I don't use those kind of tactics at the moment. I'm hoping that they're just going to form nice savings habits and start budgeting themselves, which they're showing at the moment. Yeah. But I'm not afraid to in the future if we need to.
Actually, and actually to demonstrate to them that, money has to be earned. It's not something that just, you go to that tree in the garden and you pluck it off, etc. For me, and I've spoken about this before in the podcast, is for me with my children, it was always a case of when they had Xboxes, their Xboxes used to go through batteries like you wouldn't believe it. And they'd go out to the battery drawer. Yeah, we have a battery drawer in our house. And they go, Mum, there's no batteries left. And I would always say, I'll just go down to that battery tree at the bottom of the garden, because the children and understandably, they did not associate any cost with those batteries, because whenever they went to the battery drawer, there'd be batteries in the battery drawer. And it was only when I made that correlation that we give them pocket money and they're expected to, utilize that pocket money, some towards saving, some towards, maybe saving for a gift for Christmas or whatever it might be. But actually, they just saw the batteries as being a never ending supply. Yes. And it was only when I thought, hang on, I need to make them aware that it does cost money to put those batteries into the drawer. But how do they know that if I've never taught them that? So that was an education to me.
Yeah, no, I think all those little lessons are so important. And it's one of the topics I've written about quite a bit, is about this moving to the cashless society, where it's some of the sort of bits that we take for granted are so extreme. So even going to the shops and paying for something with your card, we know a transaction's going on. We know that if we go and buy some bread, we get the bread and some money has gone from our bank accounts. We take that for granted because we used to pay with cash and we used to see the cash going and being taken from us, and we got something in return. Whereas kids today don't know that, and we take it. They just hear this magical beep from your watch, your phone, or wherever, the card, and suddenly you just get given this bread, and they don't see what's being taken. And so for parents, we need to be more proactive than ever to make sure that we're not missing those little lessons, such as the battery tree or transactions going on. And especially with sort of games and stuff like that, where they've got currency within the game, which is just a number on a screen, as is their bank account, which is just a number on the screen. So the only money they see is these numbers on the screen. How do they tell the difference between one and the other? And so again, it's so easy for parents just to assume that they know that a bank account is real money and this game is not. But I've heard horror stories, so many horror stories of kids spending real money thinking I thought it was just in a game. I didn't realize it was connected to a credit card, and buying these covers for imaginary guns or whatever their game, robots or whatever they're playing. And so it's really important that we find ways. And what you said about pocket money is just the best way in my mind. I think it's the most underrated financial education tool there is, because it allows children to start using money and making decisions, and importantly, making mistakes. But the mistakes, the parents have to let the kids make the mistakes and suffer the consequences of their mistakes, which is really hard for a lot of parents, because they're like, well, I've got the money and my kid's upset. Why don't I just give them the money and everything's happy? But if they don't, and they just see that, oh, it's okay, I can just spend, my parents will just give me some more, because eventually that could easily lead to, oh, I've spent too much. It's okay, I'll just go, mum and dad won't give it to me, but the credit card company will. I'll just carry, and you can see how that continues going forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are so right that the contactless society, and I hadn't actually made that connection, so that was brilliant. They just like my boys did with thinking the batteries just turned up in the drawer. It's exactly the same with regards to the ping with the contactless card, and children not actually making a connection that anything is going on in the background. And I think, again, what is happening here is we are making it harder for children. When we were younger, we were physically, or at least I was, and I presume the same for you, I was physically given, and I can't remember how much, it might have been a £5 note or a £10 note, in my hands. That was my pocket money. So I physically got to feel and touch it. Whereas today, with my boys, it's a Go Henry transaction, basically, from my bank account to their bank account. So it's understandable to a certain extent. They just think the money happens, as opposed to them actually getting. And it's funny, you've just sparked something in my mind. My dad, their grandpa, is very, very generous with them. Whenever he sees them, he will give them 30, 40, 50 pounds in notes. And you can see, go, look, we've got this. And they don't really understand what to do with it, because they're now so used to just handing over their card whenever they go to make a transaction. My dad is a big believer in cash, over anything else. But for lots of children now, when did they last see a check being written? Can't remember the last time I wrote a check. So that's no longer really an everyday currency. How often do I have cash in our car, in our purse? I only have cash in my purse now when my parents have given my children the cash, and my children will say, Mum and Dad, you have the cash, put it onto our card, because they don't see the value in the cash, because for them the exchange happens on the card. So that's a really good reminder that we do need to make children aware of that whole process of what happens in that contactless transaction.
Yeah, so it was interesting. When we started doing pocket money, we tried to do cash for all the reasons I just kind of mentioned
Yeah,
about the transaction and feeling but it's really hard to have the right cash. So even if you wanted to, you might have some, but you wouldn't have it in the right denominations to spread it out. But then also what would happen is because you don't have much cash, when we did need cash, we'd go back into their piggy banks and take it out and put little IOUs in there.
that's true. Yeah.
And so what we did is we just made it into an IOU system. So we cut out these pieces of paper and essentially created our own little currency. And so it's kind of like our pocket money currency. And so we give them these little bits of, and they've got different numbers on them, and each week they would get them. And so then when they want to buy something from their money, because they haven't got their own cards at the moment, they would have to give us the sort of tokens back, and then we'll pay for it. So again, they're starting to see that exchange. Money and currency and transaction, and they also get to see the money and sort of build it up in their little pots,
which is lovely.
So see their savings. But now my eldest is getting a bit older. She doesn't look at it as much, but I think she's got the most of the concepts now. So now that if we did give her a card, it's a bit harder here where we are to do that. But if we did, I'm sure that she's kind of picked up those lessons. But I think if I just gave her a card straight away without those lessons, I kind of always think back to when if I was a kid and someone gave me a card, especially one of those ones where it's got your own name on it.
Yeah.
I'd want to use it, no doubt. Yeah. So yeah, it's a bit of a novelty. So yeah, I think that with these cashless bits, we have to be more proactive to replace the lessons that we all take for granted that we learn, not directly but indirectly by using cash.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me about your book. What inspired you to write it, and tell me more about it?
Perfect. Yeah, so I started in 2019. I started my blogging, just saying, oh, here's some stories that I tell my kids before going to bed about different topics, about saving, investing, and some of them got picked up by the Financial Times. But anyway, I never planned to write a book. I just write into for parents. But then after a while, about 18 months, so the little stories that I had within some of the blogs, someone said to me, I should put those into a book because they're great and my kids will love them. And so, so I took the little stories that I had within these different blogs covering all different topics and put them into a story. So I had a nice kind of flow from a bit about the mindset about rich versus wealthy to earning money, to looking after the money, to making the money grow, and then even to stories about tax and debt to make sure they hold on to their money in the future. But really, the whole book is using stories. So it's called Grandpa's Fortune Fables, and fables like a story with a kind of lesson to it. And so we got this journey of Grandpa. So it's granddaughter talking about her grandpa on this adventure, and it uses the seeds analogy extensively throughout the book. And then you've got the granddaughter going through how she's using the lessons that her grandpa taught her to sort of look after, start her own little business and use that money. And so I'm hoping that as children read through the book, they'll see themselves in Gail, the main character, the granddaughter, and start following in her footsteps. And what I've really tried to do is make sure it's kind of action based. So it's not just about lots of knowledge. It's more about this little girl started to do this with her money. So that hopefully the readers will go, I want to do that with my money. And it's great that when I hear comments from readers and family saying, we read the book together, we had some really interesting conversations, and now my daughter or son wants to open this account, or has started their own little business, or is saving up for something else. And so yeah, it's been really interesting. And the best bit about it has been I've been doing it with my daughters. So every story I try out on them, they'll either enjoy it or they'll fall asleep. One of the two, but I get that nice insights, and they'll come up with ideas of improving it or coming up with names and funny bits to make it more entertaining. So yeah, it's been there, and I've just been blown away by the warm the reception it's received, and it's going to be translated into numerous new languages over the next year or so. So I'm absolutely thrilled.
That's amazing. And I think what you said there is so important with regards to taking action, actually using the book to inspire and to then actually take action. But what I love about it even more is the fact it's encouraging parents to have that conversation about money with their children, but in a way that they both feel comfortable. You're helping to remove the taboo that some parents feel with regards to should I be having this conversation with my children? If
Yeah.
so, how can I have it? Because isn't talking about money a bit icky? And you're ensuring that it's not any of those negative things. It's a really positive thing.
100%. And it really, children, especially the sort of my daughter's age, so under 10, I haven't spoken to many children above that. But they love it. They just love talking about money. I went to schools, and so I kind of do like a little 5-10 minute little presentation. Then I just say, before I go on, has anyone got any questions? And just the amount of hands that just fly up with all different types of questions, some talking about wanting to share what they've done with their money and what they've saved up for, or how they've started their own little business. But they want to know, where does money come from? Where did it first start? Who's the richest man in the world? And they're just so curious about it, but sometimes they just never get a platform to express their questions or interest in the topic. So I'm so happy when I do hear that parents are reading with their kids and they're having some fantastic conversations. But as you say, one of the great bits is it sometimes sparks the parents to start learning themselves, because they read the book, and lots of parents said, I wish I read this book myself earlier. But also it gets them to think about being a role model as well. Yeah. So as they read that and say, actually, if I want my children to be good at saving, I should be more vocal about if they are saving. If they're not saving, maybe I should start saving. Yeah. And thinking about investing, which the book sort of talks about how Gail sets up her own little investment account with the help of her parents. So it's that interaction that I really love. And I'm hoping it's a bit of a Trojan horse for all the parents to learn something in a non patronizing, confrontational kind of way, very simplistic language.
And I think that's the amazing thing, isn't it? Is when you can reach people on that dual level, the fact that, and it's exactly the same with the teenage course that I have, is that it is there marketed for teenagers to better understand that money, the concept of money and their mindset, but actually it's been designed as well for parents who either want to learn alongside their children or to do it independently, because very often when we don't understand something, that is when we shy away from talking about it. So by helping to educate them, but also the ripple effect that is had when exactly as you said, encouraging the parents to go, well, I need to be demonstrating these good behaviors, so I'll start saving. So the knock-on effect then is they are creating that financial security and starting to think about very intentionally what is available for them, which they may not have thought about if you and I had not created that sense of what I like to call the art of the possible. So well done for you for doing exactly that, and not just instilling that sense, and what is what I'm looking for? Inspiring the youngest generation, but also the generation, before them as well, because that knock-on effect, the domino effect, it could have globally is massive, absolutely massive.
Yeah, no, I really hope that's the case. And I think sometimes everyone needs that catalyst, don't they? Especially as parents, as adults, our money is so consumed, isn't it? We've got bills to pay, we've got holidays, we've got stuff for schools. So we always think our money is so busy that we can't see into the future with it. But for our children, we always look at what do we want our children to be in the future. And so sometimes it just needs that catalyst of, okay, I'm going to talk to my kids about money in the future. And therefore, all right, I'm thinking about the future for my kids. I can think about it for myself. And sometimes it just needs that catalyst, and the kids are always a good way to spark that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So how can people connect with you, Will?
Perfect. Yeah, so the best place is bluetreesavings.com. So that's my website that has all my blogs, lots of information about the book. You can get the free the first two chapters for free to check it out yourself. I'm on most social media. I'm most active on LinkedIn. So just look up Will Rainey on LinkedIn and you'll see me there. And I generally put 2 or 3 sort of tips for parents about teaching the kids about money on there. But that's
Brilliant.
the website and LinkedIn are the best places.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And those details will be in the show notes so people can easily connect with you. Thank you very much for your time today. I have absolutely loved the conversation. I would encourage people to go to Amazon to get a copy of your brilliant book and to start having those conversations with their children, because there's everything to gain and nothing to lose. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you.